Wrapped up on time, huh? Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to the County of Santa Clara's Finance and Government Operations Committee, which is also, if you notice the agenda, posted as a Children, Seniors, and Families Committee because Supervisor Chavez and I, who are both here for the record, making a quorum today. Technically, we're also a quorum of this other committee, Children, Seniors, Families Committee, which is really doesn't have an agenda before us today, but just to comport with the Brown Act, that's why that's on the agenda. You think of this as Finance and Government Operations Committee today for your purposes as an audience, as people participating in the agenda. This is, in a way, the committee that has committee jurisdiction over these matters. Again, welcome. This is a special meeting. We will have a regular meeting of this committee coming up very soon, but today we scheduled this agenda so that we can particularly focus on voter suppression and engagement, along with any other issues that come up during question and answer, or that our esteemed registrar might want to bring up, or that our esteemed Secretary of State might want to bring up. He will be rejoining us in the room shortly. He's in the building here somewhere. So with that, I would normally move right from item 1 to item 2, public comment, and I am, sort of, but we don't have any requests to speak under item 2. We do have requests under item 3. Is there anyone here that wanted to speak under public comment, which is just general comment, not necessarily pertaining to this agenda? Items not on the agenda can be spoken to now. Seeing none, we will move on to item 3. And if you look at the caption, welcome, Mr. Secretary. If you look at the caption under item 3, voter suppression and engagement, this is a panel discussion, but the first report is from Garrett Percival, Dr. Garrett Percival, Associate Professor, San Jose State University. I'll ask him to start making his way up, and while you're getting situated, I'm going to ask Supervisor Chavez, who's the vice chair of this committee, but who really led the effort to help organize this agenda today and the panel discussions today, to make sure we have a good representation, and I know she personally invited the Secretary of State. So let me turn it over to Supervisor Chavez to make a few comments and also to explain how this is going to proceed today and how she's going to make sure I stay on task and on time.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Come on, you guys. This is a fascinating topic. We are all fascinated, so we're going to be all very present. So let me just talk just for a moment about process. We have a lot of public speakers. So if you look at agenda item 3, presenters, you're going to see a whole series of folks that we're going to ask to give feedback. And the reason we're doing it collectively is we think it would be easier for you to be able to organize your thoughts, your questions, and your comments after we have a series of conversations. So we're going to have the presenters present under item 3, and then item 4, at the end of item 3, we're going to hear from all of you. And then as part of item 4, we're going to discuss what we've learned today, both from our speakers, but from all of you, and then proceed with some ideas and discussion. So to get started, what I would like to recommend, Supervisor Cortese, is that we do 2 things. That we have each person on the dais introduce themselves, because not all of you have come to these meetings before. And then I'm gonna do just one real quick thing, just a little bit of housekeeping, and also wanted to make sure we acknowledge all of the folks that are here that are also observing. Is that all right, David?
Yes, it is. And maybe right after these introductions, I know I saw at least one council member walk in. We can introduce any other elected officials that are here. Steve?
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Miguel Marquez, Chief Operating Officer.
Jeff Smith, County Executive.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
Cindy Chavez, Board of Supervisors.
Alex Padilla, your California Secretary of State.
And Shannon Boucher, Registrar of Voters.
Okay, and thank you all. Again, thank you for being here. I did. I thought I saw Councilmember Sergio Jimenez
You
come
did?
in. Did I? And he is, please stand up just so people can see you, know who you are. They
Thank
might
you
want
for
to
being here.
approach you and ask you questions. Thank you for being here. I know Maya Esparza, Councilmember Esparza, is supposed to be joining us at some point. I don't see her here yet. Along with Assemblymember Kansen Chu is likely to come walking in around 4:30. So again, for those of you that may want to ask him any question pertaining to state legislative issues, he will be around. Office of Councilmember Zoe Lofgren, Sandra Soto. Is Sandra here yet? She may be still walking over.
here?
Oh, she is here. Thank you for being here. She is the Chief of Staff here in the District Office to Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. And from the Office of Senator Bob Wachowski, Andre Waramaka Pinlock. Is Andre here? We expect he'll be joining us shortly. And we'll try to catch up on any other acknowledgements, if indeed those folks are joined by additional representatives from various elective offices and government offices here in the San Jose, Santa Clara County area. With that, Supervisor, you want to do some other housekeeping?
Great. Here's the big housekeeping that we're going to do. So because we have so many speakers and we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to have their say, we're going to do, bless you, I'm going to ask the staff for each of the speakers to put their time on the clock here and also behind us, mostly so we can all just keep really on track. And we'll do that for everybody who speaks, so nobody's being treated differently, except we're asking for our leadership here to get a little more time because we're going to want some information from them. So the way we're going to do this is with items 3A and 3B, those are really our overview items, and I'm expecting the speakers really to be able to respond to that. And so if we can, what I'd like to do, if it's all right, is move right over to item 3A and just make some introductory comments, if that's all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm really excited to have Dr. Percival here. And the reason that we asked him to come is that he is a leading thinker and actor in political science in general. He has been a real voice for the San Jose State University Political Science Department, which so many of us that are in this room who have done any kind of work in that area come from, so we're a little biased here. But he's been a partner in helping us think about creating policies and new initiatives that really engage and empower all eligible voters in the county. So we've asked him to get us started to set the table. Then we're going to move over, and I can't tell you how excited I am that we have our Secretary of State here to really better understand the strategy that he's set for the state of California. Then we're going to have different folks that we'll be introducing as they come up, who are going to give us their perspectives, both on the initial presentation on our Secretary of State's feedback and presentation, and then we'll move forward as quickly as we can do that, efficiently, not quickly, but efficiently. All right, so we'll start with our fearless leader here. So we're going to set the clock at 15 minutes, and then...
And let me just say to the members of the public, we do have one request to speak for him. Once we get to the end of 3A through 3D and next steps, 3A through 3D, we will, before we get to anything else on the agenda, we'll flip the podium around and we'll let the public speakers come up and speak at that point in time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Supervisors Cortese and Chavez, and to our Secretary of State, Mr. Padilla. Thank you, and the rest of the board members and executives. My name is Garrick Percival, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'll just give you what I've been asked to do, as Supervisor Chavez mentioned, is kind of just a brief overview of kind of big picture things. I think that can be really helpful, especially as we start talking about more detailed policies and proposals. In my comments, I'm not going to offer specific things. Certainly, I think you'll see kind of the direction I'm thinking when I get to my comments, but I think we'll have some time this afternoon to get into some more policy detail. So my comments will be focused on these three primary things. I'm going to provide a brief examination of voter expansion and retrenchment in the United States, or suppression. Then I've also been asked to kind of conceptualize passive forms of voter suppression, what do those look like today in the United States? And then what are some ways we might improve voter engagement? I'll just talk in very broad terms along those lines. So I'll start with what I see as really two primary ongoing stories in America with respect to voting. And these can work against each other in some ways. The first story is this long-running one of expanding the right to vote in the United States. As many of you know, when the Constitution was first ratified in 1789, that very few people could vote. It was relatively restricted to white men who owned property. Over the decades, that increased slightly. By 1820s, most white men could vote, even if they don't own property. But especially after the Civil War, we get the first real expansion in 1870 with the adoption of the 15th Amendment, which prevented states from denying the right to vote on the basis of race and color. The 19th Amendment, so crucial, not that long ago, really, if you think about it, 100 years ago, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified that expanded the right to vote for women. And then in the 26th Amendment, passed in 1971, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. And so these are all stories of expanding the right to vote, people that struggled and died for these rights in many cases. The second story is one that's a lot more concerning. And it's confusing because it involves trying to suppress the vote. So how on one hand do we have a scenario where we're expanding the right to vote, but on the other hand, we're trying to restrict it? And the short answer how that is possible is because in the United States, our voting systems are very decentralized. We don't have just one voting system. It's the states' governments that form election laws here under our constitutional structure. And by even a broader extension than that, the administration of election laws is really done by county governments. And we have over 3,000 counties in the United States. And so because it's so decentralized, it gives lots of opportunities for states or citizens who are opposed to the expansion of voter rights to take action and control who gets access to the ballot. So after the immediate passage of the Civil War, we have an expansion in the right to vote, and many African Americans gained that right. But by the end of the period known as Reconstruction in 1876, we had a number of states, predominantly those in the South, started to pass a series of what we consider race-neutral policies. And what I mean by that is policies designed to restrict access to the ballot but don't explicitly mention race in them. You could no longer do that because of the 15th Amendment, which says in very clear language you cannot discriminate the vote based on color. And so what these states did is pass things like poll taxes, which made or required people to pay a fee in order to vote. A literacy test, which is I've posted up here on this slide as an example of a literacy test that was given to voters down in Louisiana, at least in some counties. Grandfather clauses that said that you could only vote if your grandfather before the Civil War could vote, and which of course restricted most African Americans. So it's not just a story, these voter suppression efforts are not just a story of the Jim Crow South, but also this existed in many northern states as well, as there was backlash against Irish Catholics and immigrants that moved into New York and Boston and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So these were all efforts without really naming race explicitly, but the disproportionate effect, the negative effects, harmed racial and ethnic minorities and really prevented them from voting beginning in the 1880s. We also see, fast forward a number of years, that in the last, it was since 2013 when the Supreme Court ruled in Shelby County versus Holder. What this did is the court ruled, really weakened rather, a critical portion of the Voting Rights Act, which was adopted in 1965 after the long struggle, the civil rights struggle, which culminated in the 64 Civil Rights Act and the year after the Voting Rights Act, which banned things like I just mentioned, literacy tests and poll taxes. And what was so critical about the Voting Rights Act was it gave the federal government the ability to proactively prevent additional efforts to discriminate and suppress the vote in the southern states or other states and counties that had a record of doing that. So if a county or a state decided that they're going to change voting laws or registration laws, they had a history of past racial discrimination, that they have to get what was known as pre-clearance, that is pre-approval by the federal government, the Justice Department, or federal courts in order to make that change. And in Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court struck down a part of the provision of that law, and no longer do some of these states have to, or counties have to have pre-approval before they make changes. And we've seen a lot of, unfortunately, efforts to suppress the vote since that time. As you can see on the graph here on the right, that the Voting Rights Act was extraordinarily effective in increasing the black vote. You can see in states like Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana, you went from rates of the black vote of less than 20% in Alabama to over 50% in just 2 years' time. And so you can see the effect of federal enforcement in these issues with that particular law. Now, what do forms of voter suppression look like today? We no longer have literacy tests and poll taxes, but the newest forms come in a multitude of things depending on what state you're in, the severity of which also vary by state. But a number of states, predominantly Republican-controlled states, have in recent years passed voter ID laws, some of them very strict, meaning you have to have an ID, in some cases a photo ID, in order to cast a ballot on election day. If you don't have one, then you have to report back to an elections office to be able to prove who you are, and for many people this is too difficult to do, and so that suppresses the vote. Felon disenfranchisement laws. This is an area of policy that I work a lot and very closely in, our criminal justice system. And as our prison system has increased fourfold over the last 40 years, that the number of people who have felony records in the United States has grown as well. And many states prevent people with felony records from voting. Most states, those who are in prison, but even after they've served their criminal sentence. This affects some 6 million Americans, including 1 in 4 African Americans in states like Florida, which are some of the worst offenders along these lines. We also see a reduced number of polling stations and decline in early voting opportunities. Increasingly, as we saw in the 2016 election, online misinformation campaigns designed to intimidate and mislead voters to try to keep them disengaged or distrustful of the political system. Why even bother voting? And so this is a new form of suppression that's going to be hard to tackle because it's often hard to see and hard to measure. States moving to purge voter rolls for people who don't vote regularly or people who have moved out of the state. This is a legitimate function that state elections officials have. Some states looking to try to suppress the vote do a more aggressive purge than others. Racially gerrymandered districts, again, to try to weaken the power of the racial and minority vote in many states, including North Carolina, which has been involved with a series of federal lawsuits. And it's something I think that doesn't make the top of most people's lists, but it does for me. And that especially affects local elections, and that the move 100 years ago during the progressive movement to isolate our local elections, that is, remove elections and keep them separate from presidential years. And so we do this in many cities across California, that we vote for mayor and county boards, or I think one of the most important ones to consider is district elections for district's attorneys. In each counties, and in Santa Clara County is one of those where we elect the district attorney in an off year, a gubernatorial year, where voter turnout rates are very, very low. So one aspect I think that we can consider, again, that most people don't, is do we want to move some of these elections for mayor, for district attorney, to presidential years where we have a much larger, more diverse electorate? So how then can we conceptualize passive forms of voter suppression? This is, I think, a crucial thing to kind of get a handle on as we have some additional discussions this afternoon. And I'll say just a few things on those lines. And one is that passive voter suppression does not explicitly target one racial or ethnic group or community. These efforts are also justified and legitimized because they seem reasonably connected to some other problem or goal. So, for example, efforts to have voter IDs, felon disenfranchisement laws, strict voter purges, those kinds of things are all sold to the broader electorate and citizens as designed to protect the sanctity of the vote, to protect against fraud or strengthen democracy or punish those in terms of those who have broken criminal laws they violated the social contract. So they're always sold in a way that seem very reasonable to people, and this is one of the ways that, or one of the reasons I think that these are predominantly receive support among a majority of people in a lot of states. But yet what we should be also concerned about is the practical effect of these laws, right? Because in practice, even though they don't mention race or any one particular group, they disproportionately affect groups, primarily the poor, racial and ethnic minorities, young people that tend to vote, or tend to move more often, and older people who have maybe a hard time getting the access to the materials that they need in order to cast a ballot legally in some states. The other point, too, I want to make is that all of these efforts, all of these policies, from disenfranchisement laws to closing early voting stations to strict voter ID laws, these are all in many ways hidden by our very decentralized election systems. They're hard for people to see. They're done at the county level. Most people, to all respect to those here, the county level of government is probably that level of government that people know the least about. And so if there's not a lot of coverage of these issues, if they're done kind of very quietly, they're hard to mobilize people against them or to try to get people to understand why these matter. So as far as where we go from here, I think I just want to leave us, at least starting us off, thinking about these things, is that I think that looking ahead, if we are going to guarantee the right to vote, that it has to be something that fundamentally, that we have to say that these efforts run against or devalue democratic processes. Participation in our country, in our democratic system, is something that we should all value and needs to be protected. We have to invest in that. As we've seen over the last 2.5, 3 years, as the country is very divided along ideological and party lines, that democracy and the rule of law and the broad-based participation are things we have to invest in. We have to see that they matter. So just making the argument that, well, a lot of these laws are, there is really no evidence of voter fraud, that arguments for transparency, yes, they make sense, but they're very difficult to kind of counter, right? And especially for those that often say, well, look, you need an ID to buy alcohol or drive the car. Why don't you also need an ID to vote? It seems very logical in a lot of ways. But I think fundamentally we need to make normative arguments in favor of democracy and mass participation. That should be the starting point. That's something that we demand as a citizenry. And any policy reforms, whether it's early voting or getting rid of the strictest forms of voter ID laws or reforming our felon disenfranchisement laws, should start at that place, that fundamentally in a democracy we need mass participation. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Please do. I'm going to defer to Supervisor Chavez and the honor of formally introducing our next speaker.
So first of all, I wanted to just say how much I appreciate you setting the table. I think that's very important and very, very powerful. And I'm really very honored to get to introduce Alex Padilla. Alex has served in government for many, many, many years, and as a senator, and really has played a leadership role statewide in thinking more critically about voter engagement. And the plans he put forward are really bold plans, and I think, quite frankly, they're plans that we're all going to, as a community, have to really pitch in and make sure that they really engage and work in our community. But all of that being said, when we thought about having this hearing, we built the hearing around a day that Secretary Padilla, I almost demoted you, I didn't mean to, but that Secretary Padilla could be with us today because the visionary leadership he's played, particularly at this critical time in our history, are so pronounced and profound that we wanted to make sure that he could walk us through his vision for the state and help us understand how we can do a better job of engaging every voter in our community. So, Secretary Padilla.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez and Supervisor Cortese. It's really a thrill for me to be part of this hearing because it's such a critical conversation that's also very, very timely. Some people may be thinking, well, it's 2019. The election's not till 2020. Well, first reminder, our primary is not in June. It's in March now. We have an earlier primary starting in 2020. So those of us in the elections administration business are already feeling it when it comes to all the planning and the preparation that goes into a statewide election, right? It's not just November, it's the primary too, and it's a presidential election on top of that. So a lot of attention, a lot of energy that's going to be building between now and next March. So it's not too early to talk about it. It's not too early to prepare. And I, too, thank Professor Percival for setting the stage, because there's a big historic context for our voter empowerment and voter outreach initiatives. It's not just because we feel good. It's because of what we have been through in the course of our nation's history that is in stark contrast to what I think we were all taught in high school government class. Right? We live in a democracy. We treasure our democracy. People have given their life in defense of our democracy. And part of what our democracy represents is free and fair elections. And fundamentally, our right to vote, our right to have our voice heard as citizens of this country through our votes. But our country, over the years, has fallen short of that promise or of that value. Once upon a time, it was who was not allowed to vote. And even when, as the professor mentioned, our Constitution was changed, laws were changed on paper, it wasn't necessarily the case in practice. I like to share the following story, that when I first decided to run for Secretary of State 5 years ago, there was a couple of things happening. We saw this activity in so many other states, whether it was Texas or Georgia or Wisconsin or North Carolina, where they weren't making it easier for eligible citizens to register or to stay registered or to cast a ballot. They were making it harder through some of the things the professor went through: voter ID, reduction or elimination of early voting, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to run for Secretary of State in California at a minimum to make sure that those proposals did not gain traction here. But frankly, because California, we pride ourselves on policy leadership, right? We're looked at as the national leaders on a number of things, whether it's access to health care or renewable energy, on and on and on. And I wanted us to apply that same vision and ambition when it comes to our democracy, when it comes to civic engagement. So how can we take election security and election integrity seriously, but with that covered, make it easier? How do we facilitate eligible citizens being able to register to vote and cast a ballot in each and every election? And I think that's what we've gone about doing, both because that's the expectation, but frankly, that is the mission and core responsibility of the state's chief elections officer, which is the Secretary of State. And I will also say that we cannot do it alone. We can have all the good ideas, all the policy proposals, all the programs, but if there's anywhere that needs the public to participate, to understand the new opportunities, and to help spread the word about those new opportunities, it is elections. So let me give you a couple of specific examples that Santa Clara needs to prepare for as 2020 approaches. First things first, we know that you can't cast a ballot unless you're registered to vote first, right? We have to register to vote. And in the past, registration was kind of seen as a way of filtering people out. If it's not easier to register, then you can't be on the list and you can't vote. We've, over time, have made it easier for people to be registered by simplifying it to just a form, right? A lot of us are familiar with that form we filled out. Soon after we turned 18, we had to go to the post office or to the library or request one from the county, name, address, date of birth, signature, not much more to it than that, but we had to register to vote. We've gone now to where it's not just a piece of paper, we have an online option, right? In this day and age, Why not do it online? So if you have a driver's license or a state ID with the state of California, you can register to vote online. You can update your registration online. That's been the case now for about 5 years, and we've seen our registration grow dramatically as a result. But wait, there's more, right? We can do even more than just offer online registration, which is still a proactive step that the voter has to do, right? Whether it's filling out a form or going online, being a registered voter has been, up until recently, an opt-in relationship, right? You can be a registered voter. It's not that hard, but it's incumbent upon the voter. The burden is on the voter to take that step. And so my first initiative as Secretary of State was to propose automatic voter registration, right? If you're eligible to vote, the default should be you're on the voter rolls, unless you choose to not be a voter. If you want to not be a voter, then you tell us that you don't want to be, but the default is you're added to the rolls, and specifically, here's how that works. The vast majority of eligible voters have or will have either a driver's license or a state ID. So if you recall the first time you went to the DMV, you're asked to fill out a form, and you write down your name, your address, your date of birth, you sign, all the same things that it takes to be a registered voter in California. So why are we so duplicative, right? If folks are eligible, if they meet the age criteria and citizenship criteria, why not we make it seamless? And as you're conducting your business with DMV, if you're eligible, you're systematically added to the voter rolls in the process. That's how automatic registration works. For driver's license, for state ID, for new applications, for renewals, for change of address, etc. So that was my first legislative proposal in 2015. Took a couple of years to build out the technology with the Department of Motor Vehicles, but that was launched last April, nearly a year and a half ago. And just to put a number to it on how powerful automatic registration is, in the first 12 months of automatic registration, there was 1 million new voters added to the rolls in the state of California. You want to hear something else that's pretty powerful? Through automatic registration, there was 1 million new voters added, and approximately 3 million previously registered voters that were able to easily update their registration record, whether it was a name change, whether it was an address change, whether it was their political party preference or vote by mail preference or anything else. So the beauty of automatic registration is not just how many additional voters we have on the rolls, but the accuracy and how up to date our voter rolls are in California. So that's been phenomenal. But as we see every election cycle, just because folks are registered doesn't mean everybody turns out to vote in every election, right? That's the other half of the battle. Not just how do we get people on the rolls, but what's good enough? Is it 30% turnout? We see that far too often. Is it 50% turnout? Is it 70% turnout? Our work isn't done until we see 100% registration and 100% turnout. So if we know that being registered is only half the battle, what can we do to increase participation rates? Well, in addition to being more exciting and inspiring as candidates for office, right, there's improvements that we can make to how we administer the elections that are more voter-friendly. Again, while maintaining the election security and integrity, what can we do to facilitate people actually casting their ballot? And so my second initiative as Secretary of State, this goes back to 2016 now, we had surveyed the country to see how other states, other jurisdictions administer elections, to see what new ideas we can introduce in California. And we bundled them into what's known as the Voters' Choice Act. And I can best explain it by offering the contrast to how we've done elections in the past to how they're going to happen starting in 2020 here in Santa Clara County. Right? In recent years, if you're a registered voter, you know that you basically have just two options for how to cast your ballot. You can vote by mail, And that's pretty convenient, right? The ballot comes to you, you fill it out at your convenience, in your living room, at the kitchen table, and as long as you send it back and it's postmarked on or before Election Day, you're pretty much good to go. There's a lot of people, more than about 60% of the California voters choose to vote by mail. That's a lot. But 40% of California voters is still a lot of people. And if you're one of those people that prefers to vote in person, like my dad, it's actually been pretty limiting if you stop and think about it. Because you're limited to one day, Election Day, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and one location only, the polling place closest to where you live. Which for a lot of people, especially if you work for a living, is not exactly convenient, right? Because you got to go to work, and who has a 9-to-5 job anyway, right? So you got to work, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I deal with traffic getting home from work. Then you got to either pick up kids from school, get dinner on the table. There's this thing called life. And now if I want to vote, I got to go make sure I'm in line somewhere before 8 o'clock. That's not user-friendly. Is there a better way? Yes. With a little bit of technology, we can modernize polling places as we've known them into what are referred to in the elections world as vote centers. And here's how they work. Vote centers allow anybody to vote anywhere in the county that is convenient to them. Imagine that, being able to vote closest to work, or where you could drop your kids off at school, or maybe it is closest to home, or by the grocery store. Vote centers will be open not just on Election Day, but for 11 days up to and including Election Day. So here's where it really starts getting good. Under the Voters' Choice Act, every voter in the county will get the ballot a month before the election. You don't have to ask for it. You don't need an excuse. Every voter gets their ballot in the mail. And you have options for how to return the ballot. You can mail it back, and we'll thank the legislature and the governor. No stamps required, right? Return postage is covered. The county will install ballot drop boxes throughout the county, kind of like a mailbox, very secure, but for ballots only, and any voter can deliver their ballot to any secure drop box convenient to them in the weeks leading up to the election. Or if you're like my dad and need to vote in person or need assistance, then the options get better too, because you can go to any vote center in the county convenient to you over the course of the 11 days, whether it's to drop off your ballot, if you need a replacement ballot, if you need assistance, language, or otherwise. And here's the frosting on the cake, same-day registration. I mentioned we're making it easier to register to vote. Well, sometimes people miss a deadline, but that should not stand in the way of being able to have your voice heard in the political process if you're eligible. So every vote center will accommodate same-day registration where you can show up, register, and be able to fill out your ballot, and then the county will do the work on the back end to process the registration and add your ballot to the totals. So in its totality, that as a package is what's known as the Voters' Choice Act. So you saw the historical examples, the poll taxes, the literacy tests. We missed the how many jelly beans in the jar, right? 2 more modern day versions of that, voter ID, reduction of early voting opportunities. Now we're hearing about voters being purged from the rolls in different states just because they missed a couple of elections. To me, that's undemocratic and un-American, right? If you're a citizen of age, with minimal exception, you should be able to cast your ballot and have your voice heard in the election. It's our job to ensure both the security and the access, the accessibility of elections. And we're doing that by and large through improvements to registration and improvements to casting your ballot. A couple of other specific examples that I'm excited about because they've shown to be very, very successful. We changed the law a couple of years ago in California so that young people don't have to wait till their 18th birthday to sign up. California is one of a handful of states that allows 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. So it's basically filling out that voter registration form, on paper, online, at DMV, and will hold on to your information, and on your 18th birthday, your name is added to the rolls. And you can vote in that very next election, and I hope in every election for the rest of your life. That's been so popular. In the last couple of years alone, more than 400,000 young Californians have pre-registered to vote. 100,000 of them turned 18 before last November's election. And I'm told that about half of them, maybe a little bit more than half of them, actually cast their ballot. That's huge. That's empowering. I'm hoping we get to 500,000 or more as we approach the 2020 election. By the way, that's if I'm hoping that when you get home tonight, you'll hear in the news that I was at Christopher High School in Gilroy earlier today. Right? My Gilroy Strong shirt is on. We're not just tweeting at young people. We're not just issuing press releases. We visit high schools on a very regular basis throughout the state to get the word to them and bring the opportunity to them directly. Supervisors, you were with me at James Lick High School last year as part of our statewide tour, and we're going to keep doing that to get young people ready to participate as soon as they turn 18. Why? Because that's what's good for our democracy, making it easier to participate and to be informed, not making it harder. Another one, addressing a very real misperception that's out there in a lot of communities. To be eligible in California to vote, 18 years or older and a citizen with minimal exceptions. One of them being if you are in state prison for a felony conviction, or currently if you're on parole for a felony conviction, you lose your right to vote. Once your time served is done, your voting rights are restored, unlike a lot of other states. Re-register, start voting again. The misperception is this: state prisons are state prisons, not county jails. Felony convictions are felony convictions, not misdemeanors. There's a misperception in a lot of communities throughout the state that, I have a misdemeanor, or I've been in county jail, or I served 10 years ago, so therefore I must not be eligible to vote. That is not true. And so we have an initiative called Restore Your Vote. You can go onto our website, at the Secretary of State's website. There's this little tool, right? Answer a couple of questions, and it ends with a yes, you're eligible, or no, you're not, so that these rules are much easier to understand. There's a lot more folks eligible than they realize, and we want them to participate in our democracy. We want their voice to be heard, not just from a voting rights perspective, but from a public safety perspective as well. Just a couple more quick items. Number one, I mentioned earlier the March primary, how we're voting earlier. California is going to be one of the first states in the nation to vote in the presidential primary schedule next year. Not one of the last. We're going to be among the first. We're also the most populous and the most diverse state, with the largest, most diverse electorate of any state in the nation. And so our voice in the primaries is very, very consequential. And that's a great thing for candidates for president to come to California, not just to raise money, but to have to earn your vote. So we're making it easier to be registered, easier to cast your ballot, and your vote means even more on the national stage now than has been in the past. So I am anticipating record participation rates next March. Last, I want to mention just for a minute, election security, because we've heard a lot about cybersecurity concerns, foreign interference, hacking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Know that California has the highest security standards in the nation when it comes to our voting systems, right? Before they can be used by Santa Clara or any county in the state, they have to be tested and certified for use first. We don't just test them once and hope that they continue to work. Every county has to conduct testing of their voting systems before every election. Among our requirements are paper ballots and a voter verified paper trail that we use not just to count ballots the first time, recount when necessary, but every county is required to conduct a post-election audit after every election. So we take a percentage of the precincts and we count the votes by hand to make sure that the computers are accurate and that there's nothing questionable going on. If anything, when I was elected secretary 5 years ago, there was one concern about our voting infrastructure, our voting technology, it wasn't the foreign interference stuff, right? We have a pretty resilient set of policies that protect us from that. It was actually the age of our equipment, right? The last time our country made any sort of significant investment in our elections infrastructure was after the 2000 presidential election. I see some young people in the audience who may not remember. I'm increasingly getting gray hairs because I'm a father now. But the 2000 presidential election, do y'all remember butterfly ballots and hanging chads? Right? That was the last time Congress stepped up and said, that can't happen again. We need to improve our elections infrastructure because the integrity of our elections is important. The last time there was significant funding from the federal government was 17 years ago. And the investments that were made at the time in equipment and in technology was on technology that was 20 years old now. So that's an unacceptable position. What did your television look like 20 years ago? What did your cell phone look like 20 years ago, if you even had one, right? When it came to our voting systems, that's been the case up until recently. Because the situation in Washington is what it is, the state of California once again stepped up. Between the legislature, Governor Brown in his last year, Governor Newsom in his first year, more than $200 million has been appropriated to help counties update their voting systems. And so now every county, including Santa Clara, is on track to have new, more secure systems in place in time for the 2020 election, so that when we go vote, we can go vote with confidence that our ballot will be counted, and it will be counted as cast because we know our vote means something. So your vote is your voice. It's only heard when you exercise your right to vote, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible in the state of California. And supervisors, thank you again for this opportunity, for this audience, and for your leadership here at the local level.
Thank you, Alex. That was awesome. So that's very exciting, and we're, poor Shannon, all the beautiful visions that Alex has, Shannon actually has to implement. So we're excited that they're both sitting next to each other. What we have next is we have two panels that we asked to respond to a very particular question. And for those of you who've been part of our hearings, you know that we don't like to spend a ton of time on the problem. We're really asking for people to come up with solutions so that we can take those solutions back to our respective boards. So what I'd like to do now is invite up for item 3C. This is to receive a report on local youth and voter suppression and engagement, and what active youth voter engagement looks like, and policy recommendations to achieve that. So if we could have the panelists who are going to participate in that, if they could come forward. And we have Rosa de Leon, Organizing Director for Californians for Justice, Dr. Marianne Dewan, Superintendent of Santa Clara County Office of Education, Chief Probation Officer Laura Garnett, Shannon Boucher, from our Registrar of Voters, and Perla Nee. And if folks could just grab a seat. And Perla Nee is the CEO and co-founder of Community Connect Labs and Great Nonprofits. Now, we asked these panelists to come forward because they have been, either have a strong perspective or they've been doing work in this area. And I'm going to ask Colin to, once he gets everybody squared up, that we're going to make sure that each panelist has 3 minutes. And we're going to do this panel, and then we're going to go to our final panel, which is to receive recommendations relating to disenfranchised communities. And then we're going to open it up. So if you have any comments that you'd like to make, you can grab a yellow card.
Look like this?
Yeah.
We have one so far.
Yeah, so that if you want to give feedback or you have ideas, this would be the time. If you have cards, they're on the back table there. Maya's holding it up if anybody wants one, and we just fill that out, and we'll make sure that we call on you. So,
And I want to acknowledge, Supervisor, because we were acknowledging elected officials, and obviously all of them in their jurisdictions have a stake in all of this. Teresa Castellanos, who is a county employee here, an important one, but also a member of the San Jose Unified School Board, has been here present. So I don't know if she's in the room right now. She was certainly here earlier. Thank you. Well, and Assemblymember Chu, I did introduce you earlier. People have all kinds of questions for you, so we hope you can
I
stick
know I was going to
around.
say, you and Sergio might just want to come sit right up here, if you have time. Oh, just up here.
Sit
Just
right
to-
on at the
Just to
dais.
sit with us, if you'd like to sit up with us, we'd welcome you to do that. All right, so we're going to start. Rosa, do you mind starting us off?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosa de Leon. I'm organizing director with Californians for Justice. And a little bit about Californians for Justice. We are a statewide youth-led and youth-powered organization fighting for racial justice in public schools. And we believe that young people are the leaders, that we need to create the healthy and just, vibrant communities that we deserve to live in. We are in 4 different cities in California, and most of our members, right, you'll learn more about the importance of civic engagement for youth. Most of our members are from 14 to 18 years old. So I would like to start off to sharing a little bit about some data from one of our partners in Power California. This data comes from like the past 2 years. And some of the things that we know about civic engagement is that 18 to 24-year-olds are part of the largest and most diverse generation so far. So 70% are Black, Latinx, API, or Native Americans. And this is something that we are clearly seeing, right? Even last week, we had a strike led by young leaders. And something that is important is that this population of youth come with their own needs and recommendations and solutions to what their community should look like. So also from this polling, Power California found out that almost 50% of this youth have taken some sort of action, right, about an issue that they deeply care about. And this goes from boycotting a product that is impacting their lives, and almost 1 out of 3 of them joined a march or rally, right? And this connects to civic engagement, right? Also, in a period of 2 years, there was about 200,000 youth that registered to vote in our state, meaning that they're taking action to make decisions about what their communities look like or should be looking like. Another data point that I do want to share is that, as I mentioned, right, at Californians for Justice, most of our members are not voters because they are not at voting age. But we did have a partnership with a research group from UCLA, UCLA IDEA, and they followed a cohort of CFJ leaders who were engaged in organizing efforts. And by the way, we organize in Eastside Union High School District here in San Jose. So they followed a cohort of youth leaders beyond their high school graduation years. And they were like, how did being engaged in organizing through high school impacted their lives? So these are some of the findings that folks had. The first one was that it improved the youth well-being, meaning that youth organizing, civic engagement for young folks takes a holistic approach. By supporting the academic, by supporting the mental health and well-being of youth. So they're advocating, it's not only about a specific wins, but really the whole impact that it has in young folks.
I'm going to stop you there, and the reason is I want to make sure I'm really disciplined about people's time. Is this your last slide?
Sounds good. I will go to my last slide now.
I'm going to actually just have you leave your last slide up. Everybody's going to read it, and we're going to move to Dr. Dewan. And the reason is we're going to be, but stay because people are going to want to ask questions.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Okay, everybody got that? Increase Santa Clara County partnerships, increase county partnerships with local community-based organizations, and expand voting age to 16 years old for school board and citywide elections. Thank you. All right.
This topic is very engaging and very difficult to do in 3 minutes.
I know, I'm so sorry.
So no worries. But so I'm going to talk a little bit about the need to form a foundation for young people so that they can participate actively as citizens. We want to motivate and provide them a strong foundation to serve as effective future voters. And we can engage youth in civics life and promote the duty of citizenship by encouraging youth to work on practices where they can engage in real problems, public problems and issues that interest them, that are in their own communities or that can impact their future. The state of California has provided a number of resources and tools for school districts. In our county, we have a civic engagement initiative called the Power of Democracy. We have information about this on our website. There are two sites, one with events and the other with resources, toolkits, and other materials. And we've been expanding our efforts with social media. If we can engage adults and increase their capacity to support students with tools such as social media, we can be more effective in engaging our youth as well. We talk a lot about youth voice in our work of Power of Democracy, and one of the goals is to really lift up the youth voice and have them as active participants. And what we believe is that the authentic engagement of youth occurs when youth and adults are equitably addressing issues. They are planning together and engaging together in community. We've been very fortunate to have a number of partnerships. Mentioned the League of Women Voters, the County of Santa Clara and the Board of Supervisors, and also the Registrar of Voters. And this past year, we engaged in two special projects. One was the I Voted campaign, in which young people ages 18 to 24 from our Opportunity Youth Academy created public service announcements to talk to their peers about why voting is important and what the issues are on the ballot. Also, in partnership with Supervisor Chavez and others, we participated in voter education weeks, visited school campuses, and registered thousands of young people in high school, pre-registered and registered 18-year-olds. These projects serve as the foundation for some of the recommendations I'd like to make. One is to expand those projects and to have them be ongoing efforts that are institutionalized into our agencies. And we also want to prepare our schools and ready our community, because the seal of civic engagement is going to be available to high school students graduating in the year 2022. And if we had more equitable opportunities for young people to access civic activities such as mock trial, mock election, and others, they could earn the seal for their diploma.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dawn. All right, Chief.
Hi, good evening. I'm Laura Garnett. I'm the Chief Probation Officer. Thank you for having me. So we operate two facilities in this county operated by the Probation Department. One's a juvenile hall and one's the James Ranch in Morgan Hill. Today we have 116 youth in juvenile hall and 50 youth at the ranch. 52 of those youth are 17 and 29 of those youth are 18. So when we, you can just hit the next slide.
Oh, there you go.
I only have one slide. I'm a minimalist. So I'll frame it and then kind of talk about my recommendations. Colin, do you want to start that so I don't ramble too long? The clock. Thanks. So we're living in unprecedented times. It wasn't that long ago that many youth were shielded from the harsh realities of racism, poverty, violence, and incarceration. Those issues are now center stage in our country, with an administration set on dividing people instead of unifying them, of hurting others instead of helping them, and of villainizing certain groups of people in an effort to intentionally cause discourse. So it used to be that a small percentage of youth participated or even understood the role of government. Certainly, I believe that most people used to believe that those types of decisions were better left to the older generation. And then we had mass shootings, we have environmental crisis, and we're seeing young people step up in ways that we haven't before. For youth who are incarcerated or on probation, understanding how the system works is even more important because they are profoundly affected by that system. Just like anything else, the question of how to encourage civic engagement or understanding is the same no matter where you are. It needs to matter to you. It needs to be important to your life in some way. Youth in institutions like Juvenile Hall or the James Ranch frequently have myriad issues that result in needing time, help, and space to heal. Central to that healing is understanding systemic issues that influenced where the youth is today. Some of the most moving words I've ever heard came from a youth who had been in custody for 3 years in juvenile hall pending serious charges. He was graduating from high school and had completed 2 college courses thanks to Dr. Dewan's program, one in sociology. He talked about understanding intergenerational trauma and how that manifests in many cultures. He talked about understanding how and why someone might react the way they do because of the experiences that they've had. He had a deeper understanding of himself, his family, and his behavior. Knowledge is power, and there's often intentional effort to keep that power away from the ones who need it the most. So we need to be equally intentional about providing these learning and growing venues in places where the most marginalized people are, and certainly youth in the juvenile justice system are some of the most marginalized people in society. So the question is, why is the responsibility always on the young person to find avenues to get civically engaged? Maybe the question should be, how can we get elected officials and system leaders to be more responsive to the needs of youth? Can we stop asking youth what they need, but instead start asking, what can I give you to help you succeed? I want to just hit our recommendations. So one is a speakers bureau that would include elected officials, community leaders, especially community leaders that do grassroots work like getting soccer fields, crosswalks, that type. We are going to launch a youth advisory council similar to the one we have in the community in the ranch this year, and that'll be a governmental structure. We're working with Dr. Dewan and County Office of Education to bring more curriculum into the schools, and we will be providing voter registration cards at the ranch and juvenile hall as youth exit. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Shannon, do you want to? You need the clicker? Thanks. Welcome. Yes, yes. I'm excited for you. This is all your work. By the way, if you signed in today with your email address, we can make sure we send out slides, because I see people taking pictures, and I'm taking notes and pictures, so we'll figure out a way to make those available, and we'll both put them on our website and email them out. Would people be interested in getting them? So if you leave us your email address, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, talk fast, 3 minutes, I can do this. So the question that was posed to me that I was asked to give answers today was, can incentives be given to encourage youth and others to vote? So a lot of the panelists have already spoken about more engagement ways, and youth and others will be. So I wanted to focus in on the incentive of like giving gifts or social incentive today. So basically, an incentive can be defined in many ways, but really in simple terms, it's kind of like, giving someone a gift to do something, you're motivating them to cause an action. But as it pertains to voter registration, getting someone to register to vote or voting, you're not allowed to give someone a gift, to do one of those actions. But you can provide incentive or gift to everyone without requiring them to do something. So for example, you can give away free outreach material, free swag, prizes or giveaways, like if you're doing a tabling event where you're doing a registration table at a festival or something, or your event, you're trying to encourage public to engage with you, right? You can have items out on your table that entices them to walk up to you, and then you can engage with them. They can have an item for free without having to do anything, but you got them there and you got them to talk with you, and hopefully they'll register or hopefully they'll vote. And our office, we do over 200 outreach events a year. We go to high schools. If you need us to come out, just give us a call or email our office, and we would be happy to come out to your area or assist you with your own event. We do that also. In addition, for free voter education materials and swag, the Secretary of State's office has a great online resource. They have posters, publications, flyers like New Citizens Guide to Voting, the 16 and 17-year-old pre-registration flyers, a guide to voter registration drives if you'd like to learn more about what you're required to do, and some tips and advice, and like the Voter Bill of Rights. Okay. So you can go to their webpage. Time goes fast. The biggest thing I really wanted to talk about was I voted stickers. They provide social incentive, and they really get people to participate. And, you know, there's no monetary value to I voted stickers, but there is social value. There is the feeling of a person who's walking around wearing their sticker that I voted, I was part of democracy, I belong, we're a group, people on the street go, yeah, you know, kind of thing. So I have worked in the Registrar of Voters for over 24 years. I have helped so many customers I can't count that drove into our office just to get a sticker. In addition, this is my last slide.
Your last sentence.
My
Go
last
ahead.
sentence. Also social, digital I voted stickers. We are going to produce digital I voted stickers for the first time for people who have returned their vote by mail ballot that you can get on our website starting for the March election. So digital and physical I voted stickers. You can hashtag SDC vote and share your picture.
All right. So, all right. Give her a round of applause. She gets. Perla, I think we have, you are our last presenter on this item. Welcome. We need to get that mic on. Do you want to try again? It's on.
Testing?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for this wonderful hearing on this very timely topic. My name is Perla Nee. I'm with Community Connect Labs. We are a nonprofit that is focused on engaging low-income immigrants and other hard-to-reach people. We work on providing communication solutions on census, as well as EITC, utilities assistance, and also voter registration. So I want to start off with a story of a really incredible opportunity that we were involved in with the city of San Jose with voter registration. This was the Pokemon Go Vote event. In October of 2018, San Jose partnered with us and Niantic, which is a company that makes Pokemon Go, to motivate folks to come out and register to vote. There were special Halloween-themed Pokemons that Niantic created for the event. Folks came and were greeted by volunteers from the city of San Jose. And then folks were encouraged to text out a link to get their friends to also register to vote. And we provided that technology to track those links. And people who did register to click on those links, their friends got these special Pokemon Go hats. So it was a super fun, super successful event. What we learned from events like this, as well as some of the other work that we do on census and other types of outreach here in Santa Clara County, is to really try to reach people where they are at, especially for young people. That means texting. That means WhatsApp. That means partnering with high school clubs. Really thinking creatively about where are teens spending their time? Usually on their phones. How can we reach them on their phones? Secondly, making this language accessible. As you guys know, this is an incredibly diverse community, and to have outreach materials available in multiple languages is really key. In addition, making it compelling, in addition to Pokemon Go, we've noticed that videos are very, very compelling to young people. We have done a lot of outreach in Santa Clara County where you make these very short 10-second videos. Young people would rather watch a video than read. So it's worth the effort to invest your marketing and resources in some fun short videos. And lastly, there are great opportunities for young people to get stipends, to be paid, to be a poll worker, which is an incredible experience in addition to getting money for it. So those are some of our recommendations. I want to highlight also that there is funding available for organizations doing this work, and this is just an example of a couple of organizations that do fund locally for voter outreach and youth. And one funder that I wanted to spotlight in terms of their very innovative grant making is Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So they are funding pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, as you heard Alex Padilla was talking about that new program. They're funding relational organizing, they're funding outreach in schools, and they have a grant deadline coming up, so I posted some information there. And my recommendation is for the county to make these types of information available to nonprofit organizations.
Well done. Thank you. You see everybody writing down that number, that date. So yeah, we'll make sure we send this out. I see all of you wanting that. Thank you all to this panel. We're going to go to our last panel, and then we're going to open it up to the speakers, and then we'll open it up to the dais. Our last panelist is, this group is considering recommendations relating to disenfranchised communities regarding voter suppression and what active voter engagement looks like and what we can do to change that. So I will invite up Zelica Rodriguez-Deems, who's the Associate Director of Somos Mayfair, Jessica Vollmer, the Director of Organizing for Working Partnerships, Ruth Silver-Tobe, a Supervising Attorney for the Catherine and George Alexander Law Center, and Richard Konda from the Asian Law Alliance. One thing I will also share with you is, I actually should have done this better, is that folks are responding to a specific set of questions that we gave so that people would kind of hit different parts of the topic. So as you come forward with your thoughts, understand that these organizations do quite a lot, actually, but we ask them to focus on very specific parts of this. So as they get settled, Tamara, I want to ask Tamara to introduce herself. She works for Secretary Padilla, but she's really been the person on the ground who's been doing the voter centers across the state. So let's give her a round of applause and thank her for staying with us. All right. So Zelica, would you like to start?
Yeah, sounds good. So I am here representing Somos Mayfair. We've done a lot of voter engagement over the years, and so I'm speaking from that experience. I also want to thank you all for having this and trying to make democracy great again, because there's a lot that we have to figure out. There's a few things that I think, particularly in 2020, that we're trying to solve for, continuing to try to solve for. One is that there consistently has been low turnout rates for the immigrant community, and that is especially true, that is going to be especially true in 2020 when we look at the anti-immigrant just political climate. We're seeing lower turnout, about 20% lower turnout of voters 18 to 29 versus the general public. We are seeing an increased gap in voter turnout between low income and higher income folks. And then I think, again, the context in which we're going to be doing this work this next year, there's a lot happening. We have Census 2020. We have the rolling out of VCA. We have an administration who's going to do everything in their power intentionally to stop the engagement of low income people of color. We have several messages going out. We had the immigration question on the census that people are still really confused about. So there's a lot that we have to grapple with. And so some of the recommendations, there's a lot, but I narrowed them down. Some of the recommendations is really supporting some of our poll workers in their own training, whether that be cultural humility or anti-bias training. We had several examples of folks who, first time voting, didn't necessarily feel comfortable going into the polls because, one, they don't trust government, but then two, I think that really understanding their rights as a resident and I think also as poll workers is going to be really important. We are hoping that if we're able to shift the narrative to be more of a customer service type of relationship, I think that's going to encourage people to continue to come back and stay engaged. A central information hub for countywide voter engagement events. I know that 2018 there was buses that were leaving out of different areas in our community. We had no idea where, whose buses they were, where they were going, but we did know it was to get people to early voting opportunities. Also uploading user-friendly materials, so really being clear about what we mean by user-friendly. I am a bilingual person who speaks both English and Spanish and reads both English and Spanish, and some of the stuff in Spanish is actually really hard to understand. Partnering with trusted organizations to provide voter rights information. I think one of the biggest lessons learned is that there's a lot in voter rights. You can ask for multiple ballots, you can fill out a provisional ballot, you can actually have somebody come with you to fill out a ballot. Those things were actually really, really new to people. I think, like I mentioned, really considering a customer service type model so that people continue to stay engaged in future civic engagement. But I think for a lot of our work, I think, like you mentioned, Supervisor Chavez, this isn't the only thing that we do. We need people to stay engaged to push for systemic and policy change. And then I have one more, but y'all can read that.
Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll just have to look at it, and then we'll go to Jessica. Thank you, Zelica. Give her a round of applause. We really appreciate it. All right, Jessica, you're on. I think almost on.
Almost on.
And Colin, you've been great. Let's give him a round of applause. He's been running around. making it all happen, making it look seamless. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having us here to have this conversation. I want to talk about engaging with all voters, which is especially important with the implementation of the Voters' Choice Act in our county next year, because we have an opportunity to increase voter participation among voters of color, both through the VCA, as well as in the types of campaigns and conversations we engage in to target low propensity voters. So we know that most people care about their communities and they want to take actions that benefit their families and neighbors, which includes voting. However, low propensity voters, many of whom are people of color, immigrants, and or youth, are usually left out of traditional political campaigns because moving those folks to vote requires a longer conversation that isn't seen as strategic when the goal of the campaign is to get folks to vote a certain way on a certain thing. So those low propensity voters face a number of barriers, including, and I'm sure we've all heard this before, not believing that their vote matters. They may feel that they don't have the expertise to make the right decision for on an issue or a candidate, or they may have fear that making the wrong decision is going to harm their communities. And they may not know how to cast a ballot, so where to go, how to fill out a ballot, what a ballot looks like, where they can register to vote, and they may not have access to the support systems that they need to access that information. We also know that through our experience in our communities and now based in some research that's been done among Latinx voters in multiple states, that relational conversations, which means getting to know a person, understanding what they care about in their communities and in their daily lives, connecting their vote to having an impact and a benefit on that issue, and lighting the spark in them that they have the power through voting to impact that issue, will move low propensity voters to cast a ballot. But it's more than that. We also need to make sure that the materials that we have easily walk folks through the process for casting a ballot, including, here are the ways that you can cast a ballot. This is what a ballot looks like. Here's where you can drop a ballot off. Identify where they can get more information if they need it, and make it easy for them to make a voting plan. And lastly, we need to engage in multiple touches with these voters to build relationships and trust and continually encourage them to vote leading up to an election. So our there's a lot. And these are recommendations that are both for the county as well as for political campaigns to really move and engage all voters. So we need to change how we think about successful campaigns when we're working with low propensity voters. It's about the quality of the conversation that we're having. It's not the quantity of conversations that we have. We need funding that covers longer length campaigns in large geographies, to experiment with various methods of contact during non-traditional campaign hours, because our target voters work non-traditional hours and may feel unsafe answering the door, and having relational conversations with folks about voting in multiple languages. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. So if we could go to Ruth.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about a specific law, and when I was asked to speak here, I canvassed a number of attorneys, and none of them had heard of this law, which really worried me. And so it's California Election Code Section 14,000. It requires employers to give all employees who do not have sufficient time outside of working hours to vote in a statewide election time off. And employers get 2 hours paid if they don't have time to vote outside of regular working hours. They can be given as much time as they need to vote, but only 2 hours are paid. The employee must notify the employer at least 2 working days before the election, and the time off need only be provided at the beginning or end of the regular shift, whichever allows the most time for voting and the least disruption of the workplace, unless there's a mutual agreement. California law, and I have been in a couple of workplaces, and I have not seen this posted, and I see you're nodding, and it's it required to post a notice. We see different kinds of notices about workers' comp and the other laws, but this law, no. A notice to their workers advising them of the provisions for taking paid leave to vote in a clearly visible place at least 10 days before every statewide election. And you can download, every employer can download that notice and print it, and it's at the Secretary of State's website. And I see you're nodding too. And you can call the Elections Division of the Secretary of State to order a poster. It's a really nice poster too, very, very colorful. Employees who serve as election officials must be provided leave on election day and may not be disciplined. And so since this is a law, if you were disciplined or fired, you could file a retaliation claim, and there's penalties. The leave is not required to be paid. Polls are, as we heard from Secretary of State Padilla, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. each day. But as was mentioned, workers work crazy hours and different hours every day. And I apologize, it should say most low-wage immigrant workers. I think I have immigration on my mind, but are not aware of these rights. And we need a statewide, and I should also add a county-wide campaign to educate workers about their voting rights in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Conda, Executive Director of Asian Law Alliance, and I was given the topic of ways that employers can enable their employees to vote. But I wanted to start out actually before that, and that I'd like to recommend that employers actually help their permanent resident employees naturalize by providing lists of all the nonprofit organizations, as well as publicizing our countywide Citizenship Day. And secondly, employers should help their employees who are eligible to vote registering by providing the registration forms at the workplace. Obviously, with the new Voters' Choice Act, employers should provide information about the vote centers, both the vote center that is closest to the workplace, as well as the complete list of all the vote centers. And it should be posted in the break room or lunchroom or somewhere that's very accessible. I'd like to suggest that employers invite the ROV to their workplace to present information about vote centers and have this be a company-wide kind of meeting. And I'd also recommend that employers have a meeting with their employees at least 1 month before Election Day to, again, remind them about the right of employees to have 2 hours paid leave. And also to remind employees that they can vote by mail too if they choose. Another idea is just to have employers post banners, signs, things that will just encourage people to vote. And finally, I'd like to suggest that employers consider giving employees at least a half a day off to vote, paid half a day off. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I think that concludes the panel presentations for today, for this hearing. We do have 3 requests for public comment under this general item, item 3. I'm not sure, we'll see which particular areas folks want to speak to, but let me call folks up. You can all come up, actually, since there's 3 speakers. You'll have up to 3 minutes each to speak according to the rules of the Board of Supervisors. And you can come up in any order. So we have someone named Doug, Andres Quintero, and Eric Hernandez. And if there's anyone else who would like to come up and speak, it looks like there is. Supervisor Chavez is. I had 3, now I have 4 altogether. But if anyone else wants to speak, it's not too late. We would like you to fill out a speaking form, so for the record, but at least come up and announce yourself if you want to speak. Are you Doug?
I'm mic. Yes,
Yeah, I'm sorry, let me explain. The mic is built right into
Let's
that
go right
podium,
in.
so you really don't need to do anything except just walk right up and start speaking.
Excellent. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for all being here tonight. This is great. I came here with the understanding that I wasn't sure what this was going to be about tonight, and I wanted to inform myself. I learned a lot of good things tonight that I didn't know, and there are some things I disagree with. And my personal opinion is a few of the followings. The young lady that was over here and was talking about the parolees or the young kids in these programs that we're trying to get them back involved in the community and being able to vote. And I really like that part. I really like the part which I had never thought of before, is that felons shouldn't vote. They've lost that right when they committed this crime. But again, after their crime is served, I believe that, yes, actually they should probably be allowed to vote back again because they're supposed to be back into society. The suppression part is where I'm struggling a bit, because I've seen a lot of side suppression on this side, but not so much on the other side. And what I'm alluding to here is I see where we want to purge the rolls on the voters, or that we don't want to do that. But I'm sitting here thinking, well, if they're dead, they're probably not going to vote anyhow. Let's get them off the rolls. If ballots were sent out illegally to people, they shouldn't be on the rolls. Let's get a better snapshot of exactly the polls and what they say out there. This is what I think should be done. It's an opinion. I do agree with the voter ID. I think if we're saying that every vote should count, well, I would like my vote to count. If someone's voting illegally or there's fraud, let's get it out of the way. Let's get all the fraud out of the way. Not one party or the other. Let's get all the fraud out of the way. We vet for everything in this country, everything, even coming to this meeting tonight. Yet our biggest strength in this country is our election process. And that's the biggest thing we have. We should make that exactly vetted like that. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you for being here. And I want to clarify that, you did fine. Yeah, I just want to clarify going forward that I misspoke. It's 2 minutes per person under this part of the agenda. Earlier, when we have general public comment, there's 3 minutes, but we didn't have any speakers for that. Andres, go ahead.
All right, Andres Quintero, Chief of Staff to Councilmember Maya Esparza. I'm here and speaking on her behalf. I'm here to express Councilmember support for the Voter Choice Act. While much progress has been made, it wasn't until the passage of the 19th Amendment that women had the right to vote. Civil Rights Act of 1965 is what finally gave historically underrepresented minorities the ability to effectively participate in the political process. And this wasn't just in Alabama. This was right here. 10 years later, it wasn't until Latinos were actually able to effectively participate. Places like Monterey County is close. And so folks like to think, oh, it's only in the South where these things took place. No, it was California that had patterns of historical discrimination that didn't allow people to effectively participate in the political process. Things like scrubbing the rolls is still taking place in the South, is detrimental to minorities' participation in the political process. We see that those scrubbing of rolls really affect minorities for the most part, and it's done intentionally to go ahead and pull people out. I'm glad that California is not doing that. I'm glad that California is taking proactive measures to make sure that people are able to participate. On a personal note, I just want to make sure that we remember the elderly and the very young as we're moving more towards this, voting by mail. If the elderly and the young are the ones who tend to have their signatures changed, and if we have no method of reaching out to them saying, you know, for the last 5 years, your vote has not counted because your signature changed so much, you really need to come in and fill out a new card. And so I know that I take measures to go out there and click on it and say, has my vote been counted? I think I'm an outlier and a strange person that does that, and most people don't. And so if there's a way of making sure that folks know that, hey, your vote hasn't counted because your signature changed, that's just one point that I wanted to throw in there.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Hi.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Hedges. Thank you very much for all the presentations and all the work that we're doing to increase participation voting by underrepresented groups. And one group that I have noticed hasn't been discussed is people with disabilities. I know that there are ways to make voting accessible, but I don't know if anyone's doing particular outreach through disability groups or to group homes and nursing homes to make sure that people know that they can register to vote, that they can get their vote by mail ballot, that they can get assistance with their ballot and whatever accommodations they need. And there are also some people who have had their ability to vote taken away because their parents, if they have a developmental disability, their parents may become legal guardians as the person turns 18, and I don't know whether or not it's the default to not give the person the right to vote, because just because somebody can't take care of a household doesn't mean that they don't understand issues that affect them well enough to cast a vote. And so I don't know if what is being done to keep, to get these people their voting rights. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, please. Eric, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Eric Hernandez. I'm born and raised in a former redevelopment neighborhood, a former Wheaton City neighborhood, which went through a lot of crackdown, redevelopment, revitalization through justice programs of the federal government. And 10 years later, we've seen a lot of our brothers who have left their neighborhoods. A lot of these brothers are known Norteño gang members, former Norteño gang members who lived in my neighborhood. And as I come back home to my parents' house, I see a lot of them living out in the streets. So I just want to make sure that through reentry, that they're able to regain their right to vote, that they're able to actually go ahead and pick up a registration form and have the right to vote restored to them. I don't want that right taken away from them. I believe that as Latinos, we should be able to have a hand at the table, and if it's through voting, then it's through voting. Another is sex workers. In my neighborhood, we've seen a lot of young women engage in sex work, and although it's their choice, sometimes not their choice. They're forced into it, and sometimes they aren't. But I want to make sure that sex workers, whether men or women out in the streets, actually have a home they can call so they can have a place so they can send their voter registration card. Sex workers are people too, and I want to make sure that they have a voice at the table as well. I believe through voter registration they have a chance at public benefits, getting EBT or CalWorks sent to them. And another are 290 offenders. I don't know what the law calls for 290 offenders, but I want to make sure that they actually have their right to vote restored to them after they complete their reentry and they fulfill the probation requirements, because those are our brothers and sisters out there that I believe that should have a voice at the table through voting. So thank you.
Thank you for being here, Eric. I think the last request we have is from Adelita Gomez.
Hello. My name is Adelita Gomez. I've been a resident of San Jose just about my whole life. And in high school, I was fortunate enough to have a civics teacher that was extremely passionate about politics, and that was leading up to the 2000 election when I was first able to vote. And so I've been voting ever since and extremely interested in all of this. To the speakers that spoke about getting the youth from the criminal justice system re-involved in the system and keeping them in it, thank you for that, because as we know in the criminal justice system, there are far too many Black and brown people that are underrepresented within our government and within many aspects of our social system. And so I just want to put it on the record that I think that it's vital that we continue to reach out to those groups of people and help figure out a way to get them to understand the value of their voice too. And so I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. Want to speak? Please come on up. Just identify yourself.
Thank you. I served as an inspector for 10 years, and I want to say that the questions that were raised today about the humility the Registrar of Voters covers very well in their voter respect training. Everything, even the pictures almost looked alike. I like that a lot. I was an inspector when we tried with the electronic voting. I thought it was great. Everybody was finished with the ballots at 8:15 instead of 9:30 or 10. but there were technological problems that other people saw that we didn't. So the Secretary or the Attorney General has told us those have been solved. And so with that, I think they will also apparently solve how you as firm, because when I registered to vote in this county 50 years ago, you showed up with your birth certificate at the post office and you filled out the paper and you went with that. As an inspector, I learned that my job was to facilitate voters who had problems or who had concerns. I had 4 clerks that did the stuff. If they had any questions, give it to me and I will work through it with the people. I don't care if it's they don't know where they're supposed to vote, how they're supposed to vote. In this regard, I love the provisional because we would fill out the paper. You can vote. You can still vote anything you want. It just goes in the pink envelope. The registrar of voters solves the problems. It is their problem. It's not the problem of the polling place. And so it's a good system. I'm glad to see it's being improved upon. I love civics in high school. Thank you.
All right, if you get a chance to fill out one of these yellow speaker cards, we'd appreciate it for the record. If not, we'll just refer to you as the inspector, which is not all so bad, actually. Please come on up.
Thank you. My name is Eliza Cosme, and I'm here on behalf of the Council on American Islamic Relations Bay Area chapter. And I just have a brief comment, which is that there's a correlation between regular mosque attendance and volunteerism, which we're kind of making the assumption that's going to connect to civic engagement, which is a priority for us, both voter engagement and census engagement. And so we really encourage all officials and advocates who are here, just in terms of meeting voters where they are at, like has been spoken to today, and really appreciate everyone's presentations. Please do feel free to reach out to CARE, and I'm happy to stick around and give out my business card, and I'm also going to leave my information, but just really encourage you to, if you haven't already, please reach out to mosques in your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It helps even if someone puts their first name on a card for us to keep the record straight later when they do the minutes for the meeting. Keep the comments corresponding to somebody's name. It's not mandatory, so you don't have to do that, but it helps us a little bit. Hi, how are you? And your name is?
Kenita Watson.
Hi, Kenita.
And I'm going to need to get a card from somebody I don't haven't seen.
Go ahead and speak, and we'll help you with that afterwards. Thank you.
And so I'm here just to speak on behalf of a minority group that I haven't heard anything about that might have unique problems, which is the transgender community. It seems that they would have, problems. Somebody was talking about bring your birth certificate. Well, if you're changing your gender, you're not going to have the same gender that you had when you were born. And so there are a number of things. I'm not sure how they would make sure that the identity that they presented, only came up once, or how the records were kept. But just because somebody's transgender, in the process of changing before or after, their vote should still count. They're still an individual. And I want to make sure that persons like that have an opportunity to be represented. Thank you.
All right, great points. Thank you for being here. And maybe Janice or Amy or someone on our staff will fill the card out for you. Thank you very much, though. And I think that concludes our public comments. Supervisor Chavez, is there one more? Oh, come on up. Please come on up. I didn't see these. All right. I know we have, it looks like we have, well, I can't read the writing, but we have a couple more. So just self-identify. How's that? Hi.
Hi, my name is Aiden. I'm originally from Stockton, California, which has a lot of the similar issues that I was hoping to hear addressed today. Some of the smaller demographics that I haven't heard addressed, similar to the lady's point before me, was that there's a group of people that we don't really talk about, and I think that as someone who's lived in downtown San Jose and was educated at State and has now worked in that area for 6 years, and anyone here who's had a similar upbringing in this area, the homeless population is horribly disenfranchised where we live. And I don't hear enough about it. It frustrates me every day. I don't honestly know what the answer is, and so I don't want to be emotional up here and just throw out ideas that I haven't thought through properly, but I do hope that there's some type of access and some type of infrastructure to support that relatively disenfranchised group of people, because I think that as city officials, you're probably more well aware than myself of the metrics of the sparsity of affordable housing, just the issues that come with that. And I think that access to polling centers and also access to the literature and the mediums that you need to actually register for voting are not readily available to a very significant portion of the people that reside in this area and within the city zone. I think that that's not something that I've really heard anyone talk about at some point, is what we're doing for people we see every single day that are only rising in number, in count and quantity. And I think that I just want to come up here and say I hope that there's something being done about the homelessness and also those that suffer with addiction and their access to voting resources and basically just the processes that you need to vote. I think that no one probably has a perfect system, but I genuinely am just here as a voice for people who haven't really been spoken about today. And I hope that there's some type of work being done, because it's something that is very prevalent where we live, and it's something that means a lot to me. And thank you, all of you, for being here.
Thank you. And we have one more speaker. Is it Nadi? Hi, come on up. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble reading your writing, but at least you don't have to read my writing, because that's really bad. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nayeli, and I am a current foster youth, and I just want to bring them into the conversation because as a foster youth, I've never had a social worker or anyone come up to me about information on how to register for voting or how it even works. And I've never had any education on, any of the people that are running. And what I would like to see is more education, informing foster youth about the different options that they have, and partnering with social services agency for them to kind of register foster kids that are coming into foster care so that they can pre-register, because I think that they are a big part of this community and they would love to be involved. Also, I want to bring the topic of the Rake Center. They recently, it's been about a month that they got an eviction notice, and I haven't heard of any placements for them, if there's a new building that's going to be built for them. They are youth and babies that are mixed together, and there are youth that are using drugs next to babies, and it's been happening for years, and that needs to be solved now, especially in this situation where they don't even know where they're going to go. Thank you.
Thank you. See one more speaker coming up, and you can come up and speak now. Please come forward. That would be Taylor.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Taylor Bartuca, and I'm the president of Pi Sigma Alpha, which is the Political Science Honor Society here at San Jose State. I just wanted to say that, for one thing, for National Voter Registration Day, we were actually out tabling to get students registered to vote, and we got over 20 people registered to vote online, and we were able to do voter outreach regarding the Voters' Choice Act, and thanks to the Registrar of Voters, we were able to get supplies regarding pamphlets, pocket constitutions, and pens, and we're planning on having more events this year in October and November regarding that. And I would love to keep you guys updated. We also have social media, PSA_SJSU for Twitter and Instagram, and SJSU Votes. That's our project that we're going under. It originally started as the political participation class here at San Jose State campus, but Pi Sigma Alpha has been able to take it over, and I just wanted to personally thank the Registrar of Voters for giving us all of our supplies, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Thank you all for your comments. That concludes our request to speak under item 3, request by the public. And Supervisor Chavez, you want to go back to the dais, I think particularly here, to get any final comments before we conclude and talk about next steps. And if I can just say a couple of words quickly and get my comments out of the way, and then I will defer back to you again, and maybe you can get us concluded here in whatever order you want. But I do want to thank everyone for being here, of course, the Secretary of State, and of course, thank you for being here to represent. We know the Secretary of State, in case you came in late, was Alex Padilla was here and had to leave after his report to catch a plane, which is pretty common in his job, going up and down the state, trying to keep things in order. Thank you for the top executives of the county to be here, county executive, our COO, county councils represented here, Assemblyman Kenson Chu, who represents a good portion of this county, and Council Member Sergio Jimenez, who represents a good portion of this county, as well as a city council member in South San Jose, and of course our registrar. And again, thanks to Supervisor Chavez and her staff, and I want to thank my staff also for doing a tremendous amount of outreach. We bumped into ROV and voter choice people and census people and everyone out there doing outreach over the last couple months for the county at various places, festivals and other places. My comments, so that concludes my concluding remarks as well, Supervisor. But my comments are pretty simple in that it's striking to me, listening to the diversity of speakers today, and having a little chance to talk to Secretary Padilla before we started. I was able to chat with him for a few minutes before we came into the chambers today. We often talk about income disparity. We talk about education disparity. We hear about those things. We talk about those things. We wrestle with those things to some degree. And I, having been on the ballot 10 or 11 times myself, understand there's a disparity in terms of voter turnout and to some degree voter sophistication out there. But I have to say, even after 27 years of my own elective office activities and another couple of decades before that as an involved, very involved person, when I was growing up, voting day was anticipated as if it was a holiday, like the 4th of July. Not a holiday that you get a day off, but as one of the most important days on the calendar for anyone in America, anyone in California, anyone in San Jose, anyone in Santa Clara County. It was the culture, so to speak, and I don't mean ethnic culture. I don't mean my grandfather was an immigrant here, so my family's only been here, a couple generations in that respect. I don't mean culture in that sense, but there for some reason it was prioritized in the household, perhaps in the grade schools that I went to, for whatever reason, my worldview became that this is one of the most important days of the year. I can hear loud and clear at this hearing something that I didn't hear as sharply ever before, in my career, that there really is a disparity that we have in that regard. That there are people, a lot of people, who don't hold the franchise, the right to vote, and even voting day or voting month as it is now. We basically, under Voter Choice Act, as we heard today, will have really truly a rolling 30 days of voting. It isn't held as poignantly and as significantly among some of our citizenry, some of our eligible people who are eligible to vote as it is with others. And we need to, I'm just trying to do, I don't know what the root cause remedies are, but my root cause analysis is starting to go to, we need to make this more of a big deal with kids just like we have starting at second and third grade, just like we've done with other issues that have been important, whether positive or negative. Tobacco, now vaping, climate, I think is going to be that way. If we aren't getting second graders to start thinking of that as an important issue, we're all doomed. And maybe we're doomed as a nation if we don't start getting second graders to start holding voting as something that is really one of the most important things they'll do in their lifetime. So I just want to say, whatever we decide to do in terms of next steps, I hope we can shift our paradigm a little bit in terms of what we do here as a county, as opposed to just getting 17-year-olds to vote, to register, or getting 18-year-olds to turn out, or just getting people to turn out who are already registered. That we also need to do civics. Civics 101 needs to start at first grade or second grade, I think. So that's just my 2 cents. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you all for showing up, and thank you to everyone who's spoken or public comment. Supervisor Chavez?
Great, thank you. What I wanted to do is see if there are any thoughts or comments from anybody who's here, anything that struck you that you wanted to weigh in on, and hear from you. And you don't have to. I'm not putting anybody on the spot, Dr. Smith, but I was curious. I'm just kidding. I really wasn't putting you on the spot. But if there's anything that you just want to lift up as a priority, and then I have some recommended next steps, but I'd like to go to you first, and then I'll make my comments last. Dr. Smith?
Well, first of all, I again wanted to thank the supervisors for bringing this important issue forward in a special subcommittee meeting. It's been sort of depressing to watch, well, not sort of, very depressing to watch federal processes as we have real challenges to our constitutional rights. And I really think that all of the panel members were right on, and appreciate everything that they had to say. But I must say that Dr. Percival's comments, although frustrating historically, at least give me hope, because they demonstrate convincingly that after crises in this nation, we all turn to ourselves and begin to find solutions for problems. Pointed out that after the Civil War was when we started spreading the vote, and it was after the beginning of the Industrial Revolution that women began to have suffrage. So hopefully after this great challenge to our Constitution that's occurring right now at the federal level, we will all come together again and value our right to vote. So I appreciate that, and appreciate the committee.
Thank you. Assembly member?
Thank you very much. I first of all wanted to thank Supervisor Chavez and Cortese for hosting this hearing, and thank you all for participating. What I got out of this hearing is that there is some lack of outreach to the homeless, to the foster youth, that's LGBTQ community. So if anybody have any idea how can we reach out to those people, please feel free to contact my office. In the state legislature, we have many of the measures. The ACA 4 passed both the Senate and the Assembly to allow those people that were term 18 before the general election to vote on the primary election. That didn't go very well, so and also the ACA 8, trying to lower the voting age to 17, and that doesn't vote very well either. And we do have a bill on the governor's desk, which is SB 72 by Senator Winner, to allow people to register on the date of the election. So we're still waiting for the governor's signature on that issue. Again, my email address is Kansen, KANSEN .CHU, which is my name, at ASM, stands for assembly.ca.gov. So any ideas, please feel free to contact my office. When I got elected in 2015, I had an idea of changing the voting date to a weekend, but my conversation with my colleague in the legislature, it doesn't vote very well, so I didn't carry that bill forward. If you think that it is something that I should at least to give it a try, please feel free to contact me. But it's a very complicated issue because other states they choose to do it on Tuesday, and we're talking about 2 hours time off from work, 3 hours time off from work. Is that enough? Maybe we should just go ahead and change it to a weekend. But with the voter's choice, we actually give the people a month to vote. So I don't know that it is a bill that I should carry, and if I do, and I don't know how far it will go. But thank you very much for participating. I appreciate all of your input.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it. I support everything that's been said and all the efforts at the state level, certainly the county level. We very much appreciate that. One of the things I just wanted to say very quickly is that the San Jose being the largest city in the county of Santa Clara with about 1.1 million people, I think we have a very unique obligation, a very deep obligation to make certain that we do everything we can as a city to include as many people during the voting process as possible. And I just wanted to share with you that to that end, several months back, several colleagues and I actually moved forward a recommendation to move the mayoral election, which would move it from the governor sort of cycle to the presidential election. And we knew that that would increase turnout by about 30 or so percent. Recognizing that was one of the easiest things we could do as a city to increase voter turnout, which I think most of us or all of us in this room support. Unfortunately, it lost on a vote from 6 to 5, and so that didn't happen. But I just want to let you know that that continues to be an effort that we as a city try to move forward. And I suspect if you pay close attention that there may be other opportunities to increase voter turnout. I appreciate your engagement, and I want you to know that we all care deeply about getting more people engaged. So thank you so much for all the efforts. We appreciate it.
So excuse me. I just wanted to kind of reiterate a few things. As Secretary Padilla had said about the new Voters' Choice Act, if you haven't heard about that, talk to me after or go to our website for more information. The whole point of our county, and thank you, Board, for passing this on April 9th, was to provide more voter convenience, more options for voters to get out, vote, more days, more hours, more ability, mailing everyone a ballot. I mean, we are trying to do many things to increase the voter registration, to have people turn out and vote, and to register. So I just want to make sure you find out about the Voters' Choice Act and how things are going to change for March. But along that, too, to, helping different various communities, including the disabled, things that I've heard, with these Voters' Choice Act, with the vote centers, we're going to have, as he said, you don't have to go to one polling place, you're one assigned polling place. You can go to any one in the county, probably up to about 110 voting centers in the county. We're going to have increased accessibility equipment. We are having increased staffing at the vote centers, including greeters and everyone's being trained on how to work with people walking up or maybe with a disability, and language. We're increasing language services at these vote centers. In addition, the conditional voter registration, where you can register to vote, come to any vote center that day, register and vote. And the 16 and 17-year-old pre-registrations we're doing. And for the person that mentioned, the mismatched signatures, a lot of people may not be aware, but we now mail letters to every voter who didn't sign their vote by mail ballot and every mismatched signature if we can't verify it to one of their items on record. So those are just naming a few of the wonderful things, I feel they're wonderful things, to increase the voter registration, the turnout, and the voting, and the services, language services, disability services. And like we just actually a week and a half ago went and did a demonstration at the San Jose Vista, the Center for the Blind. So we definitely are out there and appreciate your support, and we are looking for groups to help us, like this student there, get out the word about the Voters' Choice and the League of Women Voters. They've been a great partner too. So if you're interested, please see me, and thank you for your time.
Button mic, I should know this. Thank you, supervisors, for providing this platform for Secretary Padilla. My name is Tamara Raspberry, and I'm his assistant deputy, and I do outreach for the Secretary of State in Northern California. A lot of familiar faces in the audience, so probably I've reached out to you all or called you or begged you for something at some point. But I just wanted to let you know, and the Secretary wanted me to let you know, actually, that there's a lot of the discussion about youth voting. He wanted to make sure that everyone knew that on our website, and I think it was mentioned earlier as regards to worker voting. But for youth in college and college student voting, we have an entire web page dedicated to that. And on that web page are resources that are free. You could print, you could distribute, you could order posters, and it's information about programs we have on campus, our partnerships with the 3 college systems in the state, plus the independent colleges, the pre-registration program, how you can get involved, poll worker programs in the counties, and it's just a plethora of information that's available at no cost. You can print everything for free. We don't ask you to, for permission to make copies or anything. But if you want to order from our website, you can also order it through there. So I don't want to give you the wrong link, but if you just go to Secretary of State's website under elections, there's a student voter program, I think the name of it is, and the page is the Student and Youth Voting Initiatives. I also want to let you all know that we have this. I know the Secretary mentioned the Restore Your Vote program, which is our tool to help those who have been formerly incarcerated or may have had a criminal, we call it a criminal background, about their rights to vote. And so I was encouraged by the discussion by the panelists about more engagement on that. And that's what I do. I spent all day Tuesday at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County doing voter registration with inmates there. So I'm happy to share that information with anyone who wants to, or if anyone wants to do it in Santa Clara County, let me know. But for those, I heard the probation, but I didn't see who was speaking, but I would like to talk to you about that because that's an avenue that we haven't gone to yet, but engaging the youth and those facilities, if they're incarcerated, is definitely a place that we need to be. So thank you.
Great. So I do want to thank all of you for your patience. We're a little over time, and I like to try to hit that time button pretty hard. I want to just make a couple of observations and just also say one very big thank you. I wanted to say thank you to everybody who came out here. How many of, for you, this is the first time you've been to this building? So we have a few people. Thank you very much for coming in. It's not always easy to get in here, so we appreciate very much seeing you. And I also want to say I thought the comments that people gave were really thoughtful, and I want to thank all the panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. I know not all of them are even still here. They did such a good job. Let me just share what I have been thinking a lot about, and I really appreciate, Dave, your comments because it solidified something that I had been thinking about as I was listening to the speakers. At a national level, we have the Voter Rights Act, and I know that there are some leaders at a federal level, led by Congresswoman Lofgren, that are really trying to look at how we continue to expand the franchise of voting, how do we do that in a really thoughtful way, and how do we do that across all corners of our country. So at a national level, our colleagues are taking a look at it. At a state level, California has a state Voter Rights Act, like here are the rights you get as a voter. And one of the things I want to recommend to my colleagues is that we think about a county Voter Rights Act that includes the kind of outreach and the kind of reflection that we want to have at a local level, and that these are rights that we guarantee the public in terms of access. So that's kind of one body. And then the other, and I wanted to speak to something that, that Dr. Percival said that I thought was really interesting, and that is that when anybody wants to pass a tax, they wait for a presidential election. And the reason that happens is we know that more people come out to vote, and that broader group of people are allowed to not just weigh in and participate, but you get the most people you can get out to vote. So I was kind of struck by two things. One is the way we position what we position on the ballot. And the second is, how do we get the word out? Now, one of the things that I've learned, and this is actually something we were thinking about relative to voter suppression, is that as a candidate, we've run elections and we talk to people who we think are going to vote. So what happens in a presidential election is the newspapers are talking about it, the TV's talking about it, so everybody is informed that something really big is happening. In off-election years, it's much quieter. And it isn't, something that we're all talking about. It isn't something that that's being discussed in school. There's a lot of silence. And I think what I would like to recommend is that we take the ideas that we heard today, get feedback from our staff, and then propose a local voter rights act that has a work plan to it that does what Dave fundamentally said, which is, how do we go about creating a culture that, irrespective of where you're from or where you live or what ideas you have or what your issues are, that we know that it's a cultural norm in our community that you vote, that it's just a part of being a person that you vote. And I think that will really allow us to dive into the issues. I thought I was particularly moved by Nayeli's point around foster care, because what's interesting about that is we are both in charge of voter registration and voter education on a broad scale, and we are providing social workers. And so you're right, like, why are these two, how can you be part of this family and not have that conversation? So there's lots of places that, whether it's a disabled community or people who have a harder time seeing or reading, that there are just a lot of ways that we can reach really deep down into our community and do this. So I really want us to think about a Santa Clara County Voter Rights Act that really advises cities and school districts and ourselves about what we do to make a more inclusive Santa Clara County. And my hope is that is something that other counties would be able to take on in their communities. And I just want to close with this one story, if you don't mind. So my father, and he's passed away many years ago, so I can tell this story now. But when I got a chance to vote for the first time, it was a really, really big deal in our house. And we talked about all kinds of things at the dinner table, everything you can imagine. And I remember coming home, and I went to go vote, and it was the first time I voted, and I was really nervous. My palms were sweaty. I remember signing my name and seeing that my dad's registration was different than mine. My dad was a registered Republican. For those of you who know me, you know that I'm not. And so I got home, and I said to my dad, I said, "Daddy, I didn't know that you were a Republican." And he looked at me, he was totally serious about this, and he said, "First of all, that's none of your business." And I said, "Well, it was on the list. Everybody could see it." And he said, "Everybody could see it?" So we had that discussion. But then the second thing he said to me is, "Why does it matter?" And his point wasn't Republican, Democrat, it wasn't that. His point was that we all had an obligation to vote. That is what he was telling me. Like, we have an obligation to be engaged in our communities in deep and meaningful ways, and one of those ways was to vote. And so I think it just struck me when I heard your comments. I was like, that's right. That is exactly how I was raised, and I want to share that with our whole community. So thank you all very much. If you're interested in getting the slides, please make sure we have your email address. I'll thank all of you very much, and we'll let you know when this comes to the board. Thank you, everybody.